Hey nerdy knitters! In this video we're looking at shawl knitting patterns for beginners. All of these shawls are worked in garter stitch. That means you're knitting every row. And of course you're going to have to use some increases and decreases to create the shapes, and some of them have a few other elements added for some interest. But they're all still very basic shawls that even a beginner can knit. All of the patterns are available at Lovecrafts, and they're also linked down below, so you can just click on the ones that interest you the most. You'll also find some timestamp links in the video description box if you want to jump to any point in the video. But before we get started, I just want to say hey, I'm Tanya, a certified knitting instructor and a knitwear designer with the goal of helping you become a confident, adventurous knitter. Now let's look at those patterns. The first two patterns are top-down triangle shawl patterns. A top-down triangle shawl is actually the first shawl I ever knit. It starts here, and you increase at 4 points to create the triangle shape and the depth of the shawl. Now it might look a little complicated if you're a beginner, but I promise it's really not. It's quite simple. These two patterns use that construction, but if you want to learn more about that construction, I've linked a video down below that focuses just on showing you how a top-down triangle shawl is knit, if you want to learn more about that. Now the first shawl on my list is the Grain Shawl by Tin Can Knits. That was the pattern I used to knit this shawl. It follows that top-down construction. It's easily modified. They have a basic pattern with very clear instructions and some good tutorials that will walk you through everything you need to know. And it's adaptable for any weight of yarn. So if you want to knit a heavier worsted weight shawl for winter, or if you want to knit a light fingering weight shawl, you can use this same pattern and knit a variety of shawls. All the same shape. You can change the colors, you can use different yarns. There's lots of things you can do with this basic pattern. The next top-down triangle shawl is the Garnet Eyelets by Colleen Kinnersley. Now this one has eyelets included, but it's still basic garter stitch top down, but this time you have some eyelet rows in there. This one also features a heart-shaped top-down triangle shawl construction, so that changes the rate of increase just a little bit to create more of a wingtip on the edge of the shawls, but it's not hard to do. The next three patterns are asymmetrical triangle shawls, so instead of knitting top-down from the neck down to the bottom, we're starting at one tip and working our way across, and then binding off one side of the shawl to create the triangle shape. I have a video all about how this kind of shawl is constructed. You can find the link for that down below as well. The first one in this section is called Boom by Playing with Fiber. It uses a simple 2-row repeat that you can also use with any weight of yarn. So if you have a heavier yarn or a thinner yarn, both of them will work. And you're increasing along one edge and decreasing along another. Second in this section is Meridian by Annie Baker. Now this one adds a second color. So if you're a new knitter, you'll learn how to add a second color to your project. And it also has a row of eyelets separating the two colors. It's still pretty simple. It follows that asymmetrical triangle shape, but you add in that second color and that row of eyelets that separate the two colors. Now the last shawl in this section will have you working with some 10-gram mini skeins, or if you have some leftover yarns, you can use those as well, paired with one solid color. So if you're a new knitter who hasn't learned how to add a second color to your project, this might be a good way to try that out. Drop the Fringe by All Knit Up Designs. This one has all of those colors. It has fringe, it has some eyelets. It's still a basic triangle shape construction, but it has a lot more interesting elements added to it. We have 5 more shawls to look at, but I just want to ask and see if you have any comments about any shawl patterns worked in garter stitch that would be good for beginner knitters. If you do, be sure to leave a comment telling us about it. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe if you like to get nerdy with your knitting. Now, let's look at those last 5 patterns. This next one is a triangle shawl, but it's knit from the bottom tip upwards. It's a really simple construction, and I've linked a video that shows you how these types of shawls are constructed. You can find a link for that down below. This one, called the Happy Scrappy Shawl, is also a good one if you have lots of leftover colors that you want to use up. It's worked from the bottom tip upwards and has fringe on the edges, so I'm guessing there's no need to weave in your ends. You'll just be using them to create the fringe along the side. So if you have lots of scraps and bits of yarn that you want to use up, or some of those 10-gram mini skeins that you want to combine, this would be a good project for that. What's really nice about bottom-up construction for shawls is you can change the rate of increases along the edges to make it a more deeper or a shallower shawl depending on what you want. And it's really easy to customize the size that way, and then you just keep working on it until you run out of yarn or you're ready to start your next project. Now the next shawl is still a triangle shawl, but this one is knit tip to tip. You start at one tip cast on enough. This one had stitches for the body and also for this edging. And then you work increases until it's as deep as you want it. And then when it's as deep as you like, you start working decreases and going down into the other tip right there. It's another really easy construction method. I have a video that details this. You can find that link below as well. And the shawl I'm featuring in this category is Promise of Spring. It's a tip-to-tip design. This one uses 3 different colors. For a lot of interest, you start with one, and then you work a section of stripes, and then you work a section in the other solid color. And it also has a simple lace border added on. So if you're ready to try a bit of lace edging, this is a good project for that. Now these last 3 shawls all have different construction methods. This first one, called Bielha by Joanna Ignatius, is a crescent top-down shawl, and it features some stripes and a picot bind-off. Now a crescent shawl is not hard to work. It's very similar to a top-down triangle shawl, except your increases are along the edges instead of along a center spine. And you'll most likely be increasing on right side and wrong side rows to create the wingspan for this shawl. Number 9 on the list is One Skein Wonder by Amanda Kremer. Now this one is still an asymmetrical triangle. It's got increases along the edges, but then you're binding off stitches at set point to create this sort of a swirl. Now last on the list is I Smell Snow by Melody Hoffman. This is also a triangle shawl, and it starts at the top and works its way down, but you're casting on all of the stitches and gradually decreasing along the edges. It's still garter stitch and also has some eyelets in there, and I believe she uses some different colors, so there's sort of a fading technique going on as well. Now if you have a recommendation for a beginner style shawl that's worked in garter stitch, be sure to leave a comment and tell us about it. Give this video a thumbs up if you like it, share it with your knitting friends, and be sure to subscribe if you like to get nerdy with your knitting. And if you'd like to look at some more shawl knitting patterns, check out the video I've linked right here.